A 97% critics rating on Rotten Tomatoes, a record 16 number Oscar nominations, 6 Golden Globes, BAFTAs, SAG, NAACP, AFI, National Board of Review. We are talking about 2025's Sinners on Do You See What I Mean? All right, Mia, when this came out, also, can you believe it's been almost 1 year since Sinners came out? 11 months.
Because everybody kept saying May, and I was like, I'm pretty sure it was April, but I will say
You're
this.
right, April.
I think that it didn't do the widest release around the US. Like, that's my guess, because sometimes New York will get things a week or two before everyone else does. So I always try to like, if everybody says May, I'm like, all right, yeah, it was wider release for May. Yeah.
But you're right, yeah. This is only the 5th feature by a young director named Ryan Coogler. We know him mostly from the Creed and Black Panther films. It cost around $90 million to make, and to date it has made just under $400 million worldwide. It's made by him, a lot of his team from USC. So he has his producing partner and wife, Zinzi. He has Autumn Gerald as the DP, which, Mia, you've probably seen on magazines covers. The DP is up for Best DP. She would be the first woman to win the award, which would be amazing.
Yeah.
It has amazing composer Ludwig Göransson, who is kind of the heir apparent to Hans Zimmer, but he also has industry veterans like Ruth E. Carter doing costumes, and one of his schoolmates, Hannah Bleacher, doing production design. This is a huge historical and musical epic set in 1932. It's about the birth of the blues. It's about sharecropping. It's about America. It's about white supremacy. It's about a whole lot of stuff. So, Mia, take me back to 2025. I want to ask you 2 things. One, what was your first impression of Sinners? And then later on this episode, we will ask you why you think it deserves to be Best Picture. But take me back in time. What did you think when you first saw it?
Okay, so listen, I went into 2025, Joey. I don't know if you remember, I almost feel like we first had a dinner at the start January. You were going to see Dracula? Was it Dracula you were going to see?
Oh,
Nostrin, yes.
Maybe Nosferatu.
Yes, Nosferatu. You were going to see Brooklyn's Nostran. And then you went to go see Baby Girl. And that I remember that was kind of like our first like, good to see you. And I was feeling really low about movies at this time because, man, like, listen, it was just becoming dry and it was full of Marvel all day long. I almost want to say there's been 2 to 3 Marvel movies that come out every single year since like 2012. Like it was just like,
I know.
I was exhausted. And then this movie kept previewing during those bigger movies and you're kind of like, what is this? But I had read an article about how people were saying like, you know, for those of us who grew up during the 80s and the 90s, we saw some of the best movies ever made, epics, right? But they were like, at this point, there's no more stories to be told. And so everybody was recycling everything. So this was like Beetlejuice 2 is coming out or a remake of Overboard. And so I'm not going to lie, I was really feeling sad about the state of movies. And I was like, this one, I'll go see. It's going to be interesting for sure, but let's see what it does. And I almost want to say there was only one movie before that. And I want to say it was like Origins that had come out. And that was the only other movie I was excited about. So when I went to go see this, I didn't even wait for my friends, Joey. I pulled one of your moves where I went to go see it opening and I went full price. So it wasn't me doing one of those like season passes.
Or the Tuesday at 3 show.
Yes, but honestly, I left and I was like, this is the best movie I have seen in a really long time. And it made me feel like, but when was the last movie that you saw that you felt this good about? And so it kind of was a game changer for me in terms of like what I felt about the film industry and how much I was actually looking forward to going to the movies. So this one was special. It Okay, think about all those damn Marvel movies, okay? Because Ryan Coogler is in that list. Like,
That's
he's a
right.
part of that kind of like, okay, who's making the next Marvel? Do they deserve to do it? I know there's like
Yeah,
DC comics as well, but like, those were the only movies getting to do scale and budget and all-star casts and like
yep,
that was not regular within the last like 10 years. Let's pretend like maybe you had like Inception or you had a Batman movie, but those were coming once
right.
a year. So this was special. This was special.
Yep. I agree. And some of the best parts of 2025 in film is the original storytelling. So as we talk, it's Sunday, March 8th, 1 week from today. One of these two frontrunner films will be crowned Best Picture: Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another or Ryan Coogler's Sinners. And it would be great if either win because they're both original, just as you say. Now, I do want to go back to something. What did you think of Black Panther and Wakanda
Oh,
Forever? So
those
Ryan
are
Coogler has done Fruitvale Station, Creed 1, 2, 3, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. Did you like those Marvel
oh
entries? Did you?
yes, because
Yes. Okay.
they sat in their own bank and they were doing something very very different from the
Yes.
cultural
Agreed.
references to some of their inspirations from the like these graphic novels. Like they were pulling in so much history and legacy that is real, and they were still actually tying in the actual comic. So I was like, they're making something very different than just a comic movie, right? You don't
Yep.
even need to know these characters to kind of show up.
Absolutely. Yep.
They created a world for you that it's just like you recognized, and it didn't require another film to give you that reference. So that was really cool. But I also remember
Agreed.
thinking, I was going to those Marvel comic movies as more of like a friend to friend activity, right? Where you're
Ah,
like,
yeah.
this is hangout because I didn't grow up on. Wait, did you grow up on comics?
You know, I didn't grow up on comics, but Marvel movies are blockbusters, and I grew up on
Okay,
blockbusters. My dad was my original curator, and it was all about Indiana Jones
okay,
and the
okay.
Terminators and Gone with the Wind and Hello Dolly. These are
Yeah,
blockbusters. So to me, Marvels are blockbusters, but I agree with you. These are auteur pieces, Black Panther and Wakanda Forever. This is Ruth E. Carter, who's been designing costumes for 4 decades.
right.
This is not, and a lot is said about the Marvel slop. It's Marvel, but these are some of the best directors and actors of our generation, and they were magnificent films, incredible soundtracks, so many ideas. I love how Coogler stitches in his own history.
Right.
In Black Panther, we have this group of kids in Oakland who has no technology, and you have this wealthy African nation who has technology, and there's a conversation about black people should share this with each other, and that was just really interesting. That's deep stuff for Marvel. So I don't dismiss Marvel, and I agree with you. Those two were
Yeah,
just super dynamic, and I feel like Sinners follows that. In Sinners, Coogler does the same thing. He traced the history of his family from Oakland back through the South through to Africa. So this is not just a generic story.
yeah.
This is personal to him, which I think adds so much kind of heart and passion
That's
to
the
it.
thing.
You
It
know,
had a different type of heart. When you look at the long list of these comic book movies,
right?
they all had a message. They were for the whole family, but there was always something where you weren't expecting them at Oscar season at all. And there were so many things about, for instance, like the Black Panther series that everybody was like, wait, can we nominate Angela Bassett? Like, can we not? You started to see that this could be more than just the comic book, maybe your framework, but I think Kugler kind of gives this foundation and he like gives scaffolding and he gives some other things that make it feel modern. And it was something where I felt like those films came out and they were events. But I also
Yep.
think there's an element where, okay, and we'll talk about this maybe as we go along, there's an
Yeah.
element where you felt in some of these films that he has so much more autonomy and final cut and decision making. And you didn't really, throughout that last like decade plus,
Great
that was
point.
something that
Yeah.
you didn't really hear. That, in fact, people were getting fired left and right directing, some of these Marvel
Sure.
movies, but they weren't getting that final cut. So there's some elements where it just felt like, okay, that's all corporate, and this has a little more heart. And so
Great
I
point.
was so
Yep.
ready for whatever this was going to be.
Yeah.
Because, okay,
Yep.
let me ask you this actually. When you saw the previews, what did you think this movie was about?
Well, the first trailer that I saw left me with an impression that it was more genre, that it was a vampire film. And
Okay.
that's one of the things I wanted to ask you. The first thing that I say about this movie when people express reticence to me, oh, yeah, I saw that it's up for Best Picture, but I don't really like horror. The first thing I say is this is not a vampire movie.
It's not a vampire
That is
movie.
just a little metaphor. It's just a little bit of magic realism to make the medicine go
Right.
down, to add an element that distances us. Because if you are white and watching this movie, you might get put off by the white supremacy and feel guilty and gross. And if it was just that, it would be a different film.
Right.
So
Right.
magic realism is just a tool that directors are using. So that's the first thing that I thought when I saw the trailer. But I also thought this kid is a genius, and I'm all in for whatever this is.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
I wasn't sure because it had such a spin of modern and historical. I wasn't sure if it
Yeah,
was going to be a time travel movie. I was like, is this a
fair
time
point.
travel movie? Like, I want to see what black time travel is looking like.
Totally.
And to me, there's an element of it where it is a time travel movie. It is actually a time travel movie, because it's actually a movie that happens not in chronological order. It kind of starts with like somewhat close to the end
Oh,
as the
true.
beginning.
Yes. Then it goes back.
So it is more of like a retelling, like a storytelling kind of vibe. And I'm like, when you think about that kind of like move from chronological storytelling, what the first thing you think of is like that damn Citizen Kane, this like moment where you're like, oh,
Great
he's
point.
dying, and who's Rosebud? And that's exactly the opening of this film. It has this kind of like Citizen Kane kind of vibe, which I was like, okay, so it is still what the trailers were talking about. But
Yeah.
I think it was
And
a
I'm really
little
glad.
more than a vampire moment.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I'm glad you mentioned Citizen Kane because right before this episode, I went back and reviewed the list of best pictures going back almost 100 years to 1929
Yeah.
when the first picture went to Wings. And I looked at all of these and I thought, what maybe not reminds me of Sinners, but what company would I put Sinners in? And I wrote down Gone with the Wind in 1939,
Right.
How Green Was My Valley in 1941. By the way, that was the upset year that Citizen Kane kind of should have won.
Right.
Casablanca in 1943, West Side Story 1961, Amadeus 1984, Unforgiven, Forrest Gump, Chicago, 12 Years a Slave.
Right.
This to me sits in with all of those pictures, and a lot of those, as you say, do have time travel too, or different chapterized
Right. They're not
storytelling.
just like
Now we
from
know,
start to finish. It's like, okay, let
right?
me tell
Yeah,
you a story, which starts to take on this
yes,
other, like, kind of, this sort of epic element, right?
yes.
And
It's an epic.
it
Yeah,
kind of frames it right away as an epic. So I was like, oh, like I think this can't go wrong.
right. Yeah. We're going to talk about the real history that Coogler squared his story in right after this short break. So there's a myth about the origin of the blues, and players like Eric Clapton used to tell this story. And it's well known. It takes place in 1932 in Clarksdale, Mississippi, where we are set here in the film Sinners. And this talented guitar player named Robert Johnson comes upon a crossroads, and there he finds the devil. And the devil said, if you give me your soul, I will tune your guitar, and you will be the best guitar player that ever lived. So in the first scene of Sinners, we see the film place music against religion. So the son of the preacher comes through those church doors in the very first scene, and he's bloody and he has half a guitar. And that's your point,
Right.
Mia, about how we go back from there. So this is a story about the
Right.
blues. And
Right.
that pull from real history, I think, makes it so much bigger than some of the other Best Picture entries. We stay with it the entire film. The very first audio sounds that you hear in this picture is from one of three 1932 Dobro Cyclops guitars. Very old. This is what is said the blues has been founded on and played first on. Composer Ludwig Göransson searched the world and found only three left, had them shipped to LA, and they're used for the actual picture. So the guitar becomes a totem. It becomes the magical tool, and we hear this dialogue saying that sometimes people are so talented that they can pierce the veil between life and death.
There are legends of people born with the gift of making music so true it can pierce the veil between life and death, conjuring spirits from the past and the future.
So within like 90 seconds, you've got music, you have religion, you have mysticism,
Right.
you have history. I was kind of grabbed right. Were you grabbed right away in the beginning?
I
was
was
just
definitely
like
on the ride. I mean,
magnetized.
we both loved the score, and we both were like, "Oh, this is the music is
Love.
pretty it's incredibly captivating, right? And it kind of holds you through quite a few scenes. I mean, you're the way that this film is like captured in terms of like we're going from one place to the next as these twins arrive in town and are ready to buy and sell and get started. You
Yeah,
kind of end up on this fun little like road trip. It's pretty adventurous, so it does feel quite it feels like the music sits so well into it, but I think that that starts to make even more sense once you get an idea that these aren't just like vampires per se. They kind of feed on the soul of music. There's a dynamic where they're
that's right.
targeting very specific groups of people. So it's not just like they're here for blood. They're here for a certain type of longevity and soul. So that's why I was like, is it a
Yes.
vampire movie? Because these guys aren't necessarily, they're following some vampire rules, but their goals seem quite kind of expansive. Like you're more dealing with the underworld and you're more dealing with, kind of
Right.
like these dark forces. So that's where I was like, it's kind of different from a vampire movie in that it still holds those epic qualities of man
Right.
versus, history, culture, the
Yeah.
gods,
Yeah.
the it's got fate intertwined, and it just has a very different vibe than what horror is trying to capture.
Yes. Yeah, great point. One of my favorite pieces of how it subverts that vampire myth is that in the middle of the film, the lead vampire, who is Irish, by the way, and Mia, when I first saw this, I walked out thinking, oof, Irish people may not like that movie.
No, no, no.
But there's a pivotal scene where the vampire is talking to Smoke and Stack and everybody at the Juke and says, look, we're seeing what's happening to your culture. Those KKK members are coming back tomorrow to kill you. You do not have a future.
You ain't safe here. No matter how many guns or how much money, they gonna take it from you when they want. You built something here tonight, and it was beautiful, but it was built on a lie. Hogwood, he's the grand dragon of the Ku Klux Klan.
By the way, I was too when the English came and took our land and killed my family. He's basically just saying this happens to every culture. Why don't you join us and we can help you live? Which just makes it more interesting than just a straight vampire plot.
Okay, I actually trusted Ryan Coogler on this because he does massive amounts of research around the cultures and brings like whatever
Right.
different culture he's trying to get inspired from or draw from. He tends to like do it with really like good gloves, and that's really difficult
Yeah,
to do.
thoughtfulness.
But when the guy showed up, I kind of experienced it more of like, okay, it's our it's the black people from the north kind of vibe, so I didn't kind of take it as this
Yeah.
like the whites versus the blacks. I took it as this sort of, okay, he leveled out a very different playing field because the Irish were traditionally pretty discriminated against as well. So it also gave them this
Sure.
kind of like sneaky, like, hey man, let me in too. I'm just like you. And
Totally.
I feel like he
Yes.
captured the humor and also kind of gave a little bit of love to like infusing the music and aspects of dance and even, humor into the dynamic. It's kind of
So
leprechaun
that's a great
like.
point. You're right. It's chameleon like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So instead of being one note villains, you see them singing Irish folk songs, which they sound so contrasted from that rich blues. But I had it on this morning and I'm kind of listening to the song, being like, this is a really nice song. So he shows Choctaw Indians as, self sacrificing and actually wanting to help their fellow man. You show Chinese immigrants having successful stores. You hear about Italian wine, you hear about Irish beer. And you see these black, formerly enslaved families who are now sharecroppers. He just shows this melting pot, and I agree with you about that history. I mean, I looked up some of the stuff. I'm like, were there really Chinese people in Mississippi in 1930? Yeah, heck yes, there were.
I
So
think he's
you're
showing
right. He
he's
brings
showing
all that
all of
history and
that
research.
cultural enterprise because black
Yes.
sharecropping and that sort of story and lineage kind of carries post Civil War I mean, it's not like we're in 1890. But I think he's
Right.
showing like this sort of post Civil War how business really looked in the South and in these
Yeah.
towns. What are all of these different cultures that came in? What I think a lot of times gets really frustrating is that a lot of films try to pretend like, no, we can't really talk to these cultural elements. We don't want to offend anybody. So they strip them from the films, even though
Yeah.
historically they were always there. And
They
so
were
what
there.
I feel like Ryan Coogler's doing is just sort of giving us kind of more of the real history versus the Hollywood one that says,
Great point.
well, we don't have
Great point.
time to touch on these things and we don't want to offend anybody. So we'll just, we'll turn it
Great
into
point.
high
Yeah.
noon, it's a vibe. But
Yeah.
I thought what was really
Yeah.
interesting when the, vampire characters really show up, they're showing up and it's almost like the actors give this very sincere, like, we love music. We are here not and technically they're not
We want to
lying.
make
They're
music with
here for
you. Yeah.
they're like, we heard the voice in here. We're here for the soul of music. So there's something about that layer that made it very symbolic, which
Yeah.
is really interesting in an epic film. Like what makes it last over the decades, which is this idea
Right.
of appropriation and the idea of
Absolutely.
that kind of like cultural borrowing. And it's something where I was like, okay, this lasts, this type of
Yeah.
storytelling. It's still a cinema, but it has all of these other layers that you
Yeah.
can play with. So
Yeah.
once again, epic.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned some of the actors. Let me ask you about some of the performances. We have Michael B. Jordan twice in an excellent twin performance. We have the wonderful Wunmi Mosaku as Annie. We have Delroy Lindo, a veteran of like 40 years, as Slim. We've got Omar Benson Miller. We have Miles Caton, who is a young discovery. He has a successful R&B career, and Coogler and his team had to wait until he was like done with part of his tour to film. And the wonderful Jack O'Connell as this villain. By the way, Mia, we just saw him in 28 Years Later,
Yes.
The Bone Temple.
Yes.
He was the
He's
lead
fun.
Satan worshiper. He was fun. So as we saw this one, I think at BAFTA for cast, or was it SAG? This is also up for the brand new Academy Award this year for casting. So, Mia, how did the cast work
Oh
for
my
you
God.
overall?
It's kind of cool because here's the thing. Sometimes, when the characters play like their twin or they go play, whatever it is, it comes off gimmicky.
It can be tricky.
But man, this really didn't feel that way. And I think it has a little bit to do with how they shot it. And it also has to do with the fact that when, a lot of times when you're telling these stories, you need different characters to have different experiences with them. So it needs to feel different enough from your supporting cast. And I think they did a really good job in kind of separating the two romantic stories to kind of help flesh that out. So Michael B. Jordan really, when you see him in one scene, you kind of know which brother he is. Like, and it's not because he's with a specific woman, it's because he embodies this personality. But I honestly, when you read that whole list, it's just like, this is an amazing cast. None of these people are like
Amazing.
struggling to pull off these performances. But really, what they need and what you always need in something like this is an amazing director. So there's an element where I'm like, if you switch the directors and threw them all in another movie, would they still be able to perform with this level of like
Great point.
chemistry? And I would say yes, which is why I feel like they do deserve to be nominated for this casting award.
Oh, they are,
which is
for
very
sure.
different to me than being like was it a director thing where he, you
Yeah.
know, under like
Yeah.
Mike Lee kind of like does this whole like work with his actors, you know, where is that
Right.
sauce coming from? And it seems incredibly collaborative.
I totally agree. These are performances we haven't necessarily seen from these people. For instance, Wunmi Mosaku, her performance as Annie, who is the long estranged partner of Stack. So Michael B. Jordan plays both Smoke, who's a bit more congenial, and Stack, who is more serious. He's more business. He's kind of the ultimate authority figure. Annie is his long estranged partner or wife. They had a child who they lost when they were just 1 or 2. He comes back, and that scene when he sees her at her shack, basically. So she is a woman who sells magic herbs, and she practices, you know, African
She's basically
mysticism.
your
And they have
local
this
doctor back then. This is where, you know, you're
local
not talking
doctor.
about
Yeah.
healthcare plans, guys. There's no United Healthcare here. There is no PPOs.
No PPOs.
And so a lot of times, yes, you would see the doctor for very specific things, but otherwise there were always like herbal remedies and things that you do to feel better, get better. And she's kind of that. She's your like, hey, my mom is really struggling with
Yep.
her whatever cough. Go get something from what's her name down the street, pay her. She's that
Exactly.
role.
From
But
Annie.
I think
Yeah.
they did a great
Yeah.
job in kind of bringing in that kind of like, you know, that the mysticism and the kind of like the
It was
religion
wonderful.
of that place and that culture, and saying, hey, like this was
Yeah.
still a part of, you know, herbal medicine that was happening back then.
Yep. That's right. And the script is so good that it delivers you mini story beats even in that scene. So just in a couple of seconds, you have Annie selling some herbs to
Right.
2 little girls. So okay, so exactly what you said, Mia. This is, you know, someone's sick, take these home. And she says, don't sell any of
Right.
this on the way home. Like your mom needs this. And they're like, yes, okay. Even just that, like, oh, little kids are hustling in this
Well,
environment. Just it gives you so much
something
story
too
right
where
away.
if you notice she doesn't really take money either. So there's an element to it where it's a very communal type of environment, which is
Yeah.
really kind
Right.
of how sharecropping down there would run. Like you would go help out your neighbor's farm if they needed some help, or if you're having some issues, somebody would come and help you. So it's one of those things when I hear people say, yeah, we all help each other around here. And I'm like, okay, listen, like we're not on a farm.
Not
It's
quite
not
the
the same
same.
thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very communal culture. So essentially, you know, people probably send her food or, you know, help take care of each other. You know, and her job is to look after their souls and their health.
That's right. Yeah. Among its very many ideas, religion plays pretty prominently. We talked about that first scene. But even in this scene, when Stack visits Annie, they have it out almost right away. He says, you know, why do you practice all this stuff? I've been in World War I, killing Germans. I've seen so much death.
I've seen men die ways I didn't even know was possible. I ain't never saw no roots, no demons, no ghosts, no magic. Just power. And only money can give you that.
You fool. All that war and whatever the hell he been doing in Chicago. And you back here in front of me. 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, and a brain that work. How you know I ain't brave? And work every route my grandmama taught me to keep you and that crazy brother of yours safe. Every day since you've been gone.
So why those roots ain't work on our baby then?
I don't know.
So there's this interesting way that Coogler in the performances raise questions, but they don't feel the burden to answer them.
Yeah.
It's like, Does this stuff work?
Well, I think
Maybe, maybe not.
there's
I mean, you
something
can't
very
really
symbolic
know,
about it because, obviously, there's
Yeah,
quite a lot of, religion and spirituality within African American culture. And there's always those
sure.
two stances that are happening. Like, the mom's going to church and praying, and everybody's like, why are you, he's clearly not getting together. And that's a part of the
You're wasting your
dialogue
time.
that we
Yeah.
all have with each other in terms of how we care and show up and support and what we're expecting to happen. So I felt like it felt, like he took a conversation that happens in the natural and he just sort of gave it this other space between these two romantic interests. So I think it worked, and it didn't seem as like it didn't seem so magic. It seemed really quite natural in terms of
Yes.
how, the unbelievers function within the believers space. And ultimately, of course,
Yes.
she
Absolutely.
ends up taking a very specific role in this film as kind of our guide in what we're dealing with. So it was a really lovely setup, the whole vibe of it. You're not sure what's going to work.
Yep.
There's this tension still held of like, is this going to work?
All right, so Mia, one other idea that is really present and handled just really interestingly is this idea of authority, the way that people speak to each other, the way that men and women speak to each other. There's a couple of times when women are shushed or men just are trying to talk to each other. And so Coogler isn't shying away. Yeah, there's a lot of races in this town, but this isn't like, this is still 1932. Women are still being spoken down to. And Wumu Mosaku specifically, she takes these opportunities to assert her character's authority. One of my favorite scenes is when there's a vampire who's coming to the door, and he's played by that big guy, and he's trying to get Wumu Masaku to Annie to let him in. Do you remember that? Yeah,
To
and
let
he
him
says,
in.
and he
I
turns to
do.
Slim and starts to talk to Slim, and she goes, "Don't talk to him. You're talking to me right now."
You big and strong enough to push past us?
Well, that wouldn't be too polite now, would it, Miss Annie? I don't know why I'm talking to you anyway. Probably your fish sandwich messed up my guts in the first place. Using old stale grease.
I ain't never used stale grease, and you know it.
Shut up, Annie. Smoke.
Don't talk to him. You talking to me right now. Why you can't just walk your big ass up in here without an invite, huh? Go ahead.
And it was like, oh, okay.
Well,
So there's this kind of jostling that
yeah,
happens
and
within,
it's not so much of a gender role dynamic. So you're talking about post-Civil War and safety, and as African Americans like cow down in the South, like there is a dynamic where, as women in general, you are dealing with a very
sure,
specific culture. Now, within the African American community, you can see as they interact with one another, they just talk quite clearly. But when having to engage with another man or another business or whatever, it's like, I need to go get my man. He's going to deal with this because that's kind of what you did back then. But I didn't actually experience it as much as like, kind of like a power dynamic between the genders. I kind of experienced it as like back then, like women, like you remember when he goes and he's like got to go buy some
yeah,
stuff at the town, and he has a little girl come in and he's like, I want you to sit in this truck. And he's like, how much do you want me? I'm going to pay you this. And she's like, okay. And he's like, you're not negotiating this, right? And essentially, it's like that type of character is trying to
yeah,
empower
yep,
women more than anything. It's not really about, but it is a dynamic where when you're dealing down south and there's a lot of violence and, speaking wrong or not dipping your hat to the right person, there is an element where, the men are going to
yeah.
take that lead. Now you see it's really funny because when he stops by to pick up the bigger guy and say, hey, I need
I
you
was
to
going to
come
bring
help
up that
me.
scene.
You notice how crazy, he talks, but at the same time, it's like those two are partners. The wife and husband both get up at the same hour.
That's right.
They are both partners. But as a man, and probably within that religious context, he's responsible for being, that head of
Yeah,
the house. And he's also responsible for making sure that the family is fed and taken care of. So there is a dynamic of respect in terms of like who's got the greater responsibility of care in this
Yeah.
at this time. And back then it would have been the male patriarch or partner. But in the case of Annie's character, whose husband obviously left and went to
Right.
Warren and moved to Chicago, you got to learn to,
Assert
seat
yourself.
Sophia it up and pull up your bootstraps and get going. So these are meek women, but for the time, there is a very clear pecking
Right.
order. It's like he's got to take the lead because he's got to be responsible for making sure we've got
Right.
food on that
Yep.
table.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you why you think it should be Best Picture right after this. All right, Mia, I'm going to read you the 10 nominees for Best Pictures, which we're going to see crowned in 1 week from today. They include Begonia, F1, Frankenstein, Hamnet, Marty Supreme, One Battle After Another, The Secret Agent, Sentimental Value, Sinners, and Train Dreams. So as we record this, it's pretty much kind of pre-decided it would be Sinners or One Battle. There certainly could be an upset. But Mia, if you were part of the voting academy, why would you vote for Sinners?
Okay, so my thing with Sinners, I really don't think this is like a debate. You asked me this on the Oscars nominations. You were like, "How do you feel about
Yeah.
the Oscars?" I was like, "Look, I'm not that person." But what I think of Oscars is they're here to set the tempo of how they think the business should head forward. From what I understand, it's more predominantly actors who sit in, as judges who get to vote on who should win. And so a lot of times they do lean towards certain projects. You're going to see those like more artistic director, intimate storytelling kind of get the strongest Oscar nods, but they usually have a hard time with these more spectacled technical films. In this case, I think you have everything working for you. You've got great actors doing their jobs, but you also have this more spectacled film, like at the range of like what we see in Gladiator, right? And this is where
Yeah.
I'm like, I can definitely see people going like, hands down, this should win. But if I had to really think about it, Sinners is one of those movies. Let's say you nominated it this year. Technically, you could have nominated it last year and it would still show up in this running. You could have nominated it the year
Agreed.
before that and it still belongs here. This is a film that I don't think anybody has a question. It's a great movie. I mean, it really is a great movie.
Yep.
And it comes packed with a shit ton of sauce. Now, here's where I swing a little bit.
Sauce. It's
Is
got the
that
sauce.
Ryan Coogler has the type of filmmaking style that has that final cut. He has the full autonomy. He pulls his collaborative crew to do things. And I sometimes feel like the Oscars still want it to run corporate and they still want everybody to run through that corporate machine. So that's where I do this. Okay, all right. If y'all don't give this film its best Oscar nod, like I understand what this is. It's the Oscars. Y'all are corporate, and he is like a pretty heavy hitting guy who's now able to do whatever he kind of wants. He's getting into a space that like your Christopher Nolan sits in. He's getting into that space, even Steven Spielberg struggled along his career with some of his projects where they just didn't get that Oscar nod. So in my opinion, I'm like, this is the best movie, and it can probably sit in this seat for a while as nominated. But I look at all the other movies they nominated, and I'm like, okay, those aren't even compare. I mean, One Battle After Another
agree.
has elements where I'm like, I know why that's here. I get why that's here. But this to me was the
Right.
best film, whether the Oscars want to give them that award or not. I'm just hoping that they do, because
Yep.
if they do, Joey, they're making a huge statement about filmmaking today. Huge one. It's about
too.
let the
Yep.
director,
Yep.
let the filmmaker do what they know is the right thing to do. And I don't know if I saw that fully in all of the movies nominated this year.
Yeah, Yeah, he's also inhabiting a space that has balance between commercialism and
Oh man.
auteurism. To use by contrast the example of Chloe Zhao, she won Best Picture for Nomadland,
Yeah.
first Chinese
Yeah.
American woman
Yeah.
to win, and that was not very corporate, and
It's
that was very
quiet
indie.
and
Then
intimate.
they gave her Marvel. Then they gave her Marvel money, and she put out The Eternals, which is one of the worst performing Marvel films, and also unfortunately caused her this great kind of anxiety and kind of breakdown.
Yeah.
After that, she went back to naturalism with Hamnet. But Ryan Coogler, to this date, his films have garnered $2.7 billion in global
Yeah.
box office, making him the most commercially successful black director of all
Yeah.
time. And these movies are really good. So this is not Eternals. This is as good as Black Panther Wakanda. This is better. I mean, I agree with you. He is a Spielberg to me. That is why this is
Right.
Best Picture. We are seeing the birth of a generational talent who has 40 years of filmmaking
Right.
next. I was really bummed out to learn that he's going more IP and he's working on the X-Files reboot. It's like you have Greta Gerwig doing Narnia, you have
Right.
Zach Kreger doing Resident Evil. So
DC.
unfortunately, he has money; he can do what he wants. And why does he want to do the X-Files? I don't know. But I also read that his next historical epic is going to be about the Queen of
I
Sheba, which I am beyond
Okay, so
thrilled
here's my thoughts on
about.
this.
Yeah,
I feel like this man is a well-oiled machine, and I think he likes to do
yeah,
these projects in between, booting up the ones that are really special to him. So I don't mind
to
waiting
him.
for good
Yeah,
stuff. I really don't, and I don't mind him taking these. Like I said, he has such an attention to detail. He knows who to collaborate with, why he's collaborating with them, and there's such a dynamic where I'm like, he understands what to do with the money as well. I'm okay with all of that. I think the only thing I was really okay, the other thing I was really excited about, because like usually with films like
hmm.
this, you called it out. You were like, there are no white heroes up in this movie, and that is very difficult, I think, in general to sell. Most of your films, your
Mm.
Mississippi Burnings, your Thurgood Marshall films, like they always have to have somebody who's like the white entry point to help everybody. And this film didn't require that at all. And so I thought to myself,
Great point.
like, this is a film that if it does win, it really does represent where we should be heading, which is recognizing that the human stories are human stories, and trust our audience to know when they're watching something good,
Yeah,
right? But
right.
Hollywood has kind of sold us like a marketing game and an answer that says it only works if this is it. So this is where I go, look, this is a very special movie, and I think it deserves that best award, man. But we know what corporate world is like, Joey. We know what corporate world
Yeah,
is
it's
like.
true.
And I'm like, I'm going to I don't want to be disappointed at the end. That's probably what I'm really working on is like, if they
Yeah,
let me
yeah, yeah.
down, Oscars don't let me know, I'm joking. They let it
No, no,
down. I
no. I mean,
want to
I
be
totally get
like
it.
level headed about it. But I'm like, literally, like some of these movies ultimately, because they're so epic, no one really cares. They end up getting their even more nod later. They get more recognition for not being recognized when they
Right,
should have
right.
been. And in this case, I feel like we
Well, it's a
did
good
it
point.
right. We've got 17 nominations here. No one can say that they didn't see what this was.
Totally agree. Some of the reasons that I think it's Best Picture. Number one, just the craft of its movie making in by department. So, costumes, production, cinematography, music, art, VFX. I think in all those ways, those teams are firing on all cylinders, more so than these other 9 films on the list. I think it has the most amount of ideas. We've talked about
Yeah,
heart,
man. Oh
religion,
yeah.
family, music. There's some sexy scenes. There's real history. There's racial history. There's multiculturalism. More ideas. I mean, if you look at its competitor, One Battle has like 3 ideas for every 10 that Sinners
Yeah.
does. I think to
Yeah.
your point about being long
Yeah.
lasting, Casablanca won in 1943, but it wasn't until the mid 50s that it became a hit. It did not at all have the legacy that it does today. Same thing with a couple of these Best Picture winners.
And it also has that kind of it's like that it's like a community vibe that you see in films like Camp, or you see in Camelot, or you see in
Right.
this sort of what's that film? Saving Private Ryan. This sort of
Yes.
collective ragtag energy to it, which where the hero ultimately starts to represent the people.
Yeah.
And that is not easy to do. And I think Saving Private Ryan is, I think it's one of those movies people are like, that one's really my favorite. But it's like, that has a similar type of tone.
Yeah.
And I feel like at the end of the day, when you add in ideas, it's like, usually you can't do that and tell the story about the vampires and tell the story about the music and tell the story about the
Yeah.
history. Like they go all out here.
Yeah, I agree. They used to be called Best Achievement in, and I think that term helps us distill what makes a Best Picture. I think that all of these department heads, they achieved something. I mean, they recreated 1932 Clarksdale, Mississippi. And I'm sorry, but that's more of an achievement to me than recreating 2014 Northern California, like with
Right.
easy.
Yeah.
I mean,
No, I'm
this
hearing
this
you.
soundtrack, this music, it has a score, it has a soundtrack. It uses 89-year-old at the time blues legend Buddy Guy. I mean, we already talked about Robert Johnson. That's an achievement, telling the story of the blues.
Right.
The fact that you mix these historical and vampire genres, that's an achievement. The
Right.
twin stuff with Michael B. Jordan, I mean, not enough has been said about that, how difficult that is.
Right.
Coogler said on a recent podcast interview that Michael B. Jordan used to start the day as one character and wanted to end as the other. I mean, it takes a whole headspace,
Yeah.
and they're so different, those characters. I forget that. So all of these total achievements are what make it the best picture of the year to
I
me,
I
and
kind of
it's going to be, yeah,
I
yeah,
have a
yeah.
question for you. Now this one I'm like, look, okay, so let's say it wins this Best Picture award. Joey, considering the end of this film, would you be comfortable seeing a Sinners 2 happen?
Great question. So, listeners, if you haven't listened, I'm sorry, if you have not seen the film, first of all, stop listening and go watch. But you do need to stay through the mid credits. So, one of the things Marvel popularized was the end credit or mid credit scene. Credits typically have stylized credits that last about 45 to 60 seconds. Then they have the long run credits, and somewhere in between there you might miss a scene. There's a great scene at the end that takes place in the 90s. We won't spoil it. So, Mia, you're right. When that came out, the buzz was, oh, there's going to be a sequel. I would say no. I mean, I love these characters, and I would love to see what the 90s in, but I just think we should leave it as it is. Don't taint the legacy with a sequel. But what about
Mm.
you? What would you do?
Oh man, I don't know, because you know what? I with you, I hate seeing stuff like played with where I'm like, it was fine, leave it alone. But I'm gonna be honest, I it depends. I'm gonna be honest, it really does depend. I don't want to see
Mm,
people coming back from the dead. And that would hurt my experience with this movie where I'm like, oh, he really didn't die in the first one or whatever. That would probably
yep.
bother me, but quite frankly, I would trust. I would be willing to trust if I saw it too that
I
they
mean,
could
you and I
handle
would be
it.
there opening night
Oh yeah.
dressed in theme, of
Oh yeah.
course. Yes, of course. Of course. But I also am just so excited for him. I mean, then again, Christopher Nolan did a couple of like he did the Batman trilogy. Steven Spielberg did two Jurassic Parks. Martin Scorsese has not done franchise, but I mean, it can work. There can be, like I love Terminator 2 and Indiana Jones 2 and Batman 2. I like those, but I want to see Queen of Sheba. I want to see new stuff.
Okay.
I don't want to see X Files, but I mean, I'll still see whatever he does,
Were you weren't
because
an
he's so
X
amazing.
Files fan?
I'm just not a big TV person. So, and I'm
Hmm.
bummed out that these young directors, they make a couple of hit films and they get franchise money, and they all grew up with the X Files. So Ryan Coogler like grew up and now he wants to recreate it. I'm more excited about creation versus the recreation. You
Mm.
know?
I grew up on X Files, and I might
Yeah.
have been a little too young for certain elements. It's a vibe, so I'm like, what's
Yeah.
he about to recreate? Because there's some
Yeah.
elements, if you've rewatched it, are really goofy. So
Yep.
I'm kind of into his artistic spin. This feels like
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
multi-layer collage that he might put
Yeah.
together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure, for sure. And your points about the Academy and who will wins. The Academy is around 3/4 U.S. based, 1/4 international. It is comprised of a couple of journalists. Like there's one journalist branch, but it's mostly branches by department. So production design,
Right.
casting, acting, VFX. So it's a lot of technical folks. It's actors, yes, but it's a lot of it's the industry.
Right.
And it's curious what they might want to pick this year. Now, as we review that list, the only ones that I could see winning or deserving would be One Battle
Right.
or Sinners. One Battle has an edge because of what people are describing as it was so prescient. Oh, look what's happening right now with ICE. Do you think that political alignment
Yeah.
would be enough to propel it to a win?
Like I said, like Sinners breaks so many different rules in the storytelling element. So for me, One Battle does capture where we are at today. And I feel like the Academy loves to like really like kind of promote these artistic film directors, and I think that PTA is that guy for them. So I felt like, okay, they have the sauce of what people would feel comfortable seeing win. I'm comfortable with either or. I really think both of these, like I will say this though, I saw obviously Sinners in April. And like I said, it had really flipped me around and going, okay, there are good films to be made. Like we can start trusting what we're seeing at the theater. So by the time One Battle was coming out, I felt pretty strong about like, okay, this works. And I think it has a little bit to do with what we had talked about at the opening. We were dealing with all these Marvel comic book movies and we were dealing with all these remakes that it wasn't
Yeah.
just in film, it's in television too. And it was feeling recycled. I mean, we weren't sure if we were going to see projects after the last, strike that happened in the film industry. There was some dynamics that I was like, I don't know if there's anything good coming out. And so this
Yeah.
movie
Yeah.
warmed me up to One Battle
Yes.
After Another. But let's say One Battle After Another was all there was. I think I would have still been sad at the end of the year. And I'm going to be honest, it's just because of like who gets to make what they feel like making was still being so
Yeah.
tightly controlled that there was no spontaneity.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you another thing. This film received a record-breaking 16 Oscar nominations, more than any film of all time. But Mia, I'm going to read you a list of films, and they all have something in common. And I want you to guess what it is.
Sorry.
The Color Purple, Killers of the Flower Moon, The Irishman, True Grit, Wolf of Wall Street, Shawshank Redemption, and Gangs of New York. What might those all have in common?
They all were nominated a lot and didn't win.
Tons.
They didn't
And
get
won
they won
zero.
They won zero. And that's
Isn't
why I
that
was
wild?
like
I mean, and that hasn't happened. I'm looking at this list. The last time it happened was 2013. Wolf of Wall Street got 5. But in 1985, The Color Purple received 11 nominations. In
Yeah.
2023, The Killer Flowers Moon's 10. I don't think that's going to happen this year because where we are a week out, the DGA Best Picture Award that went to One Battle, I think that's like an 80% predictor of who
Okay.
would win Best Picture. However, Sinners won a couple of awards like SAG and a couple others, and no film that has won exactly what Sinners did not win Best Picture. So this is a real neck and neck kind of race that we're going to have to see what happens at a week from now.
Okay, how do you feel about the Oscar campaigning? Like the shit that
Hate
people
it.
do. Like, I'm gonna
Hate
be
it.
honest. I feel like that's its own thing, but I feel like, okay, at least Sinners is campaigning. I've seen some films kind of go like, look, if we win, we win, but we're not gonna get into this nonsense of campaigning. And I'm kind of appreciating their quiet campaign. I really am. I'm like, I appreciate them acting like they would like to win this.
I agree. They're classy. But they're not
and-
doing what Timothy Chalamet does, which is wearing bright suits and showing up everywhere in character and like that whole thing. What annoys me about modern Oscar campaigning is, do you know who the father of modern Oscar campaigning is? Little guy named Harvey Weinstein. That's the era that we're in. This is smear campaigns. The only reason why Shakespeare in Love won is because he strong-armed the press and pushed Gwyneth out there for that press tour. So this is a whole different thing.
Joey,
Oscar campaigning is not the picture. In fact, I think that they should outlaw Oscar campaigning. Number one, it's super
Joey is
annoying.
so funny.
And number two, it's not the film. If you were an Academy voter, you have to click a box that says, yes, I watched this entire film, but it's all digital now. So let's say that you're like this 62-year-old, white DP in LA who's always been an Academy voting member. Maybe you watch Sinners and maybe you don't. You click the box. So it is a little bit murky once you kind of dig into it.
Right.
So I don't think that it's going to be a shutout. I still have a feeling, I don't know. I mean, if it were up to me, Sinners would win all 16, but could one battle be stopped? I don't know. It's really hard to say.
I've got like 5 awards that I'm like, okay, go Sinners. And then I've got a few that I'm like, I'm really open to some of the other films and how they are expressing. But I'm going to tell you, there's some movies, Joey, I'm not going to lie. There were some movies that really, I felt very insulted seeing sit in the same category. That's why I was like, I don't know. It wasn't really that it's like Sinners is good. One battle after another. Great. There's some movies I'm like, I get it, Hollywood, but really, what are they doing here? Like, now you're trying to tell me there's a different message here about what we really think is important. You and I both watched Hamnet. When are you going to watch Hamnet again? I know you're going to watch that sometime this week.
Probably, let me think. It's on my calendar. Oh, here it is. Yeah, never.
February. Like, like there's some movies we went to go see and no, we weren't like screaming, but I'm going to be honest, I wouldn't pay full price for some of these. I know that. And some of these movies, we talk about this, like people who listen to the podcast or whatever. It's like, some people are telling me I haven't seen any of these movies. That's real. Like, honestly, that says a lot about what the Academy is really putting out, that people are like, I really want to see. And I really feel like it's important that they, in other words, I think I get why they don't want to give every film that feels big and epic an award, right? We know why The Hobbit ain't, gonna be our best picture. We get it. Money and audience and that's not always the draw. We want to see something else. But I do feel like there's an element where, whether you've got Schindler's List or Gladiator or, The Godfather, it's like there comes a point where you really do need to say, like, come on, guys, like these aren't in the same league as what was accomplished here. And some of these people did have actual studio money. This guy is sitting here doing this with his own production company. So I don't know what we're saying here. Is there really a competition, or are we just mad it ain't fair sometimes?
That's a great point. It's a great point. Absolutely. Well, you're going to hear us one last time this season. Our 12th episode will come out Tuesday morning after the Academy Awards. The Academy Awards are Sunday, March 15th. You'll hear us in our final episode of this season on Tuesday morning of March 17th. So if you've not seen Sinners, please see it within this next week, and see One Battle as well. That way you can have a great Oscars viewing.
I think they're on
experience.
HBO, even though, I'm having a real moment about HBO. Like, I'm having a moment about them. But
oh my gosh, why is it the most expensive platform with the least amount of content?
And all of the HBO stuff's like on Netflix or something like.
Kind of, yeah.
Yes, and then they started getting rid of stuff.
Are you anti-HBO now?
You know what? I have specific shows that I'm watching on HBO. They do not run all year, so I'm questioning if I want to be the kind of like the person who just grabs it when they need it. It's at $18.50 now, and I'm gonna be honest,
HBO is $24, my friend. $24 per month. Yeah. Also, why don't you just use my login?
That's right, y'all. So log into Joey's.
We'll just give it out right here.
No, HBO, we don't share logins. We're all in the same neighborhood. We're all right here. Yes, I will use your... Well, no. Oh, I know why. Because I trade my HBO with somebody else's nonsensical Paramount. And to be honest with you, it's like more of maintaining a wonderful friendship versus maybe that's what my $18 is. It's like, we're still in this together and I love you. So here's your login. Yeah. So I share it with somebody, but I am thinking about it, Joey.
I can't wait to discuss what happens next week. But in the meantime, you've heard it here. We think Sinners is the best picture of 2025. And we will see you for one more episode on Do You See What I Mean?